Welcome to watching the new thrilling and mysterious drama for the year 2025, Nine Bodies on a Small Plane from Guatemala to the United States. One of the passengers noticed that the flight path seemed incorrect. The flight attendant explained that the original route encountered stormy weather, so the captain chose an alternative route, which would add 1 hour to the flight. Initially, the passengers did not pay attention until the plane started shaking strangely. It turned out that the GPS system had malfunctioned, and the fuel was about to run out. The captain wanted to request help from the control tower, but the radio was also cut off. It seemed the captain had guessed the end, so he lowered the plane's altitude, and then took out his phone to record his will. Fortunately, the plane's altitude was limited at the time of the crash. After the crash, the cabin remained in relatively good condition, except for the flight attendant who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, as most passengers only sustained minor injuries. The man with glasses immediately noticed that the flight attendant was suffering from a spinal fracture and there was no hope of saving her. The black man suggested going to see the pilot, and upon forcefully opening the cabin door, he discovered that his chest had been pierced by a wooden stick, but fortunately his breathing was still normal. The man with glasses pulled out the stick and was about to rescue the person. Suddenly, a burning smell spread in the cabin, and it turned out that the engine had caught fire. Jackie Chan jumped out of the cabin immediately, but it wasn't to put out the fire. He wanted to retrieve his belongings. Fortunately, the fire was large, and the passengers were able to extinguish it quickly. But everyone was very curious. It wasn't long before the unconscious pilot was taken out of the cabin, and his lung was punctured, putting his life at risk at any moment. Unfortunately, there is no signal here, and help cannot be requested from outside. The middle-aged couple was optimistic and believed that the rescue team would arrive soon. While they were talking, their gazes occasionally turned towards the man's bag, and since they were still thinking about side matters, it meant they hadn't realized the impending crisis. Another young couple accidentally noticed something that seems to be moving in the forest, and the man frowned instinctively. Now it can be said that everyone is in complete darkness, not even knowing their geographical location. While the woman with long hair, who travels constantly, guesses that this place must be in the tropical forests of Mexico, at least within a range of 600 square miles, all mountainous forests. And the aircraft's GPS is also damaged, so it's impossible for the rescue team to arrive quickly. While everyone was in a state of panic, the black man emerged from the crowd and encouraged everyone that as long as they stayed united, they wouldn't die here. Currently, the most important thing is to get to know each other. The black man started by introducing himself. His name is Zach, and he's an investigator at an insurance company. These people usually have a high level of observation skills. When the plane crashed earlier, he was the first to check on the captain's condition, because he is the person most likely to help everyone get out of the predicament. Zach was investigating an insurance fraud case involving Garson, and therefore his house was targeted for revenge. This long trip seemed like an escape, and he even suspected that the plane crash was a result of revenge from his enemies. But these baseless speculations were automatically dismissed by everyone. This is not a movie. Where do all these conspiracies come from? Then it was the turn of the man wearing glasses to introduce himself. His name is Kevin, and he was a former surgeon. No wonder he immediately realized that the flight attendant could not be saved. He now works in the medical equipment trade, and this trip was originally to purchase equipment from the United States. As for the woman with long hair, Sonia, she travels a lot. But when asked about her profession and past, she refused to answer immediately. The man who saved his bag is named Carlos, and he is a professional wrestler who considers honor very important. This trip was originally to participate in the league, while the remaining young couple boarded the plane for their honeymoon. The middle-aged couple were ordinary as they run a motel in their town, and the husband suffers from heart disease and must take medication regularly to stay alive. Counting the captain, who was seriously injured and unconscious, there are 9 survivors in total. That insurance investigator has leadership qualities and began distributing the upcoming tasks automatically. The remaining materials on the plane must be gathered as the fresh water is enough to support them for 3 days. While looking at the flight attendant's body, which had started to stiffen, Zach felt it should be removed from the cabin, or else over time it would attract worms. He and Kevin found a low piece of land, which was the best place to put the body. Meanwhile, someone came to tell them that the unconscious captain had woken up. Zach felt very excited as he had many questions he wanted to ask, but the captain's lungs were damaged, and he couldn't say a complete sentence after many attempts. At that moment, Zach thought, "Couldn't you, Kevin, who were a doctor, treat him?" He shook his head, refusing immediately. The captain's condition requires surgery, not to mention he hasn't held a scalpel in years. This place is deep in the mountains and lacks the necessary conditions for surgery. Then the simplest surgical tools and disinfectants are unavailable. When they saw Kevin's negative attitude, everyone had no choice but to postpone the idea of treating the captain. A middle-aged lady, Lisa, used the food on the plane to prepare a simple lunch for everyone. After eating and drinking, everyone regained a lot of confidence. Sonia guessed that there might be a signal at the top of the mountain, and the wrestler indicated that if the food wasn't enough, they could go hunting on some mountain, and fresh water was available in the forest and could be easily purified. Only occasionally did the sound of crawling come from the nearby captain, which slightly spoiled the atmosphere. They all turned their attention to the only doctor. Kevin couldn't endure it any longer and finally decided to take the risk and try. Under his leadership, everyone began searching for surgical tools. In the first aid kit, there was antiseptic ointment and ready-made bandages. Sonia found high-concentration alcohol and several bottles of pure water in the cabin, while Davis, with the thick beard, took out the most important surgical scalpel. When everything was ready, Kevin performed a simple sterilization using the alcohol. In the absence of anesthesia, one can imagine the pain the captain endured. Fortunately, the operation went smoothly, and Kevin breathed a sigh of relief, indicating that his injury was no longer a threat. But he must endure the post-surgery shock, and the risk of infection in this situation is high. But no matter what, things are moving towards the better. Only the young couple in the cabin are still worried about the current situation. What if they encounter a monster? When will the rescue teams arrive? At this moment, the window suddenly darkened, and a black shadow passed through the forest. This time, Amy clearly saw if there were other people in the forest, while the couple outside always felt that the wrestler had a special problem with his extremely valuable bag. During the other party's break to urinate, the great Lisa prepared to see what was hidden inside. But when she approached, she discovered that the bag was locked with a symbolic lock without realizing it. Darkness began to fall over the sky, and the survivors started to sleep, except for the newly married man who was cautiously watching outside. But his vision was limited, and he didn't know that the wrestler was still training. At this moment, the shadow quietly approached, picked up the coat, and placed it on the captain's head. The next day when everyone woke up, they only saw the captain's body with his eyes open. The doctor was full of doubts. There was no infection in the wound and no internal bleeding. So how did he die? The only explanation is that he suffered shock after the surgery. Everyone couldn't help but feel some regret. They should have left someone with him last night. Another day passed, and more bodies appeared. Amy felt that he and the hostess should be buried, but most people thought this was inappropriate and that it was better to wait for the rescue team to return the bodies to their families. Unfortunately, they still naively believed they would be rescued, not realizing that the sign of death was approaching step by step. This was the content of the first episode of the series, 9 Corpses. This series consists of 6 episodes, with 1 episode airing each week. From the level of performance in this episode, it seems worth following. At least the basic image of all the survivors has been established, and the background of the story has been largely clarified, especially since all the mysteries have been well set up, such as why did the plane malfunction and run out of fuel? What is Sonia's identity? What does the black box contain? And who is that dark shadow? And is the killer who murdered the doctor among the 8 survivors? But from this and the known information, there is no possibility of that, as this group of passengers came from different parts of the world and had no prior contact, nor do they have any motive for murder. Moreover, by looking at the title of the series, one can guess the ending, where at least 9 bodies will appear. Counting the stewardess who died earlier, there should be only 1 person left alive, but it is still unknown if that person is the killer. The only thing certain right now is that this spirited man will not survive until the end. He suffered from heart disease a year ago, and now relies on medication to survive. The doctor had expressed concern that the medication he has might not be sufficient. It seems that the bearded mare is likely to die from a heart problem. However, it seems that the most miserable so far is this captain. He unexpectedly experienced a plane crash and suffered a serious injury during the emergency landing, endured the pain of surgery, and was ultimately killed by someone. It must be said that the director is bold in using the name 9 Corpses as the title of the series, as it allows viewers to know the ending in advance, which requires adding more suspense and twists. Otherwise, the series will not be able to attract viewers to follow it. At the beginning and end of the episode, some scenes that occur after 9 days were included, but they initially seem chaotic, as it appears the army is using a helicopter to transport 9 bodies and begin investigating this murder. Skip these matters. When watching the story, you feel some shadows of the old series. Friends with different opinions can leave their comments in the comments section. See you in the next episode.